Ed, should we start by telling people who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Ed Mansel-Lewis, and I'm head of viticulture for Knight Frank, which means that I help people, mainly wine producers, find land to plant new vineyards in the UK. I also help people sell their wine businesses. I help people buy either part or all of existing wine businesses through investment consultancy, and I do valuations for secured lending, for divorce, for all sorts of things. I'm everything in wine.
How on earth does someone get there?
Well, yeah, I didn't set out to end up in wine. It's not the sort of thing that you. Well, it's a relatively nascent industry. Let's start there. It's only really in the last sort of 5, 10 years that English wine has been a sort of a phenomenon. And so when I was, 16, 17, choosing my GCSEs and A levels, I didn't ever think about English wine. Um,
Shows why asking young people what they want to do is a completely pointless question.
yeah,
Asking us what we want to do is pretty pointless. Never mind 16 and 18-year-olds.
I know. I mean, my degree was in marine biology. I mean,
It's an obvious
can
segue.
you draw the breadcrumbs for me between there and I can't. Yeah, so I ended up in English wine because I was working as a land agent,
Mhm.
and part and parcel of your role as a agent is that you buy and sell farms. And we got a phone call from this guy called Patrick McGrath, who is the managing director of a company called Hatch Mansfield, and they distribute fine and sparkling wine throughout the UK. And one of their clients was Champagne Taittinger, who are a very famous, very old family-owned champagne brand based in Epinay in France. And they wanted to buy an apple and pear orchard in the village of Chilham, which is about 5, 6 miles west of Canterbury in Kent. And they came to us because we had an expertise in buying and selling farms. And so we helped them with that transaction. I was supporting a partner who was called Nigel Porter, who was a great boss, great mentor to me, let me help him on that project.
What made
And
him great?
oh, that's a really nice question to be able to think about, actually. So Nigel would give me quite a long leash. I'm the sort of person that I want to lean into a job, but sometimes I'll get it wrong. And you could do that with Nigel, and he wouldn't make you feel bad about it. He'd wrap your knuckles, but only to sort of course correct you. And so I felt safe. I felt safe. I felt safe to try, fail, adjust, try again, knowing that he was always going to support me. He's the best boss I've probably ever had.
You ever told him that?
Yeah, I've told him that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We're still in touch. Um,
Some of
so
those traits that allowed him to create a psychologically safe environment, have you tried to embody those in your leadership as your career's progressed on?
yeah, I think so. I mean, I you have to ask my team. But I've always said to them, we're not working together, we're living together. So we've got to make sure that
Are HR comfortable with that? When you tell
I mean, we're living our lives together. Um, they're not in my spare bedroom at home, if that's what you're asking, Rich. No, we're living our lives together. And so we've got to make sure that we're all checking in every day we're checking in on each other as people.
It's what I talk about recruitment. So when we try and involve as many people as possible in the recruitment process when we find a new person, and all I'm asking the junior members of the team is, would you like to work with this person?
Mhm.
Would you like them to be part of the culture? Because once you add 6 or 7 of those opinions, that's a wonderful psychological Venn diagram of testing a person's cultural contribution to a business, because you are living, working, interacting, growing, learning together.
Yeah.
The best teams are anyway.
Yeah. And I like to boil down our we often talk about, what do we want to be as a business, or what do we want to do, or how do we want to be different? And we often say we want to be the best and we want to have fun. And that is about as simple or as complex as it needs to be. And so every month we meet in London, we always go to the pub, have lunch together, catch up, talk about life outside of work, talk about work. Um, there's a lot of fun to be had in the vineyard department in Knight Frank, and it's a privilege to be part of it and to lead it. And yeah, I look forward to Mondays.
Love it. Take us back to the apple and pear orchard.
Yeah, so it was a really, really complicated transaction because vineyards generally should only be planted on south-facing or southeast or southwest-facing lands because they get the maximum amount of solar exposure during the day. But lots of the apples were planted on north-facing slopes, and, the family, the Champagne, the Taittinger family understandably said, "We don't wanna buy north-facing land." And so there was a point at which they decided to walk away from the deal. And then Nigel was like, "Okay, well, I'll just let's put a pin in that decision for a second. Let's see if we can find somebody else who will buy the north-facing land." And then he found somebody that was willing to do that, and so we had a consortium purchase. But with consortiums, you have to have them both contracts have to exchange and complete simultaneously. And then the vendor had planted some apple orchards relatively recently, and they wanted to lease those back from the purchaser, from the Tattinger family, because there was still sort of 5 or 10 years worth of productive fruit coming from those orchards. And so there was also a sale and leaseback element. And then because there was this exchange of land where one person had the pear orchards, one person had the apples, which was going to be the champagne, sorry, the vines, they had to be rights of way. And there were this sort of myriad of different complexities, which Nigel sort of managed to pull all together. And that was all very exciting. But I think the most exciting thing for me was that it was a completely different type of purchaser and entrant coming into the industry. Because my experience as being a land agent was I was acting for people that they hadn't ended up owning this asset because they'd grafted and bootstrapped and they'd grown and then they'd made risk decisions and they'd borrowed and they'd sold and they'd grown this empire. They they had been given it by their parents, who'd been given it by their parents, and they probably didn't have the CV to get them to where they were today. They were just there because it was their birthright. And um, I say that knowing that's exactly the situation that I'm in as an estate owner. That's how I ended up where I am. But the point is that there was something really exciting about working for Patrick McGrath because he had built Hatch Mansfield into this extraordinary wine distribution business. He'd built this connection and this friendship with the Tassinger family. They completely trusted him. They were great friends. And I was like, wait a second. If people like this are entering the sector and I get to work for them and I get to learn from them and I get to do jobs for them, that's a bit of me, that is. And I just found it so exciting.
Have you always enjoyed complexity?
It's I've always enjoyed entrepreneurship. I've always found it really stimulating, really exciting. Like, for example, when I went to Cirencester, which is an agricultural college, to do a master's, and there was about nine or 10 different modules. But alongside that, they had this entrepreneurship competition called First Steps, and another one called the Grand Idea. And I had this idea that larch trees have this disease called Phytophthora ramorum, which means that they can't be used. Many of them that are infected can't be used commercially for construction, and so their values dropped. And I'd been camping with some friends, and they'd showed me how they'd logged these larch trees, and then into the side of it, they'd cut this sort of like cavity, like the shape of an oven, and then in the top, they'd with a chainsaw, they'd put like a chimney flue that came down and connected with the oven, and you could light the oven, and then it turned into this sort of like 4 or 5 hour burn time cooking stove. Um, and I just saw that and thought, this is really unique. This is really fun. It's great for the outdoors. It's great for people to cook with friends. It's great for parents to teach their kids about fire safely. And I just thought, yes, I'm here doing these modules, but I just quite want to lean into this. So I did the First Steps Award and then got given a prize of a couple of £100. So I then invested that money into getting. There was a company based at Internetley where I live who they will test products and tell you how you can engineer them in more sort of like mechanically efficient ways. And so they then came up with this sort of this way of us having almost like a run of different stages where you can make these as quickly and as efficiently as cost effectively as possible. And then I took that into the next entrepreneurship competition in Canterbury, in Cirencester, which was called the Grand Idea. And we got paired up with these entrepreneurs from the local area. And mine was a guy called Neville Shute, sorry, Nigel Shute, who had run like a business where he was making. If you go into like B&Q or Tops Tiles, or Screwfix, you'll see different products which are new to the market. And he produced this product where you could grout between tiles without using your thumb because people were cutting their thumbs. And it was like a sort of polymer, which was like, it felt like a thumb, but it obviously was plastic. And he was an entrepreneur, he was a product engineer, he was a designer, and I had hours of Nigel's time developing this idea, put together a business plan, entered that into the grand idea, and then got joint first for that. Was given £1,000 grant, and I went off and then found an angel investor who was like, "Oh, I love this idea." And so we were then trying to work out how to create this prototype and how to take it to market. And we were going around meeting accountants and lawyers, and all this time I was finishing my masters, and I just got so much out of that process, much more, I'd say, than actual the pathway. I had to have the masters because you can't get an RICS accredited. Sorry, you can't become RICS accredited unless you have that RICS pathway. But for me, the juice was in this entrepreneurship. And it got to a point where he offered me like 10 grand for 10% of the business. And I was like, wait a second, who's done that valuation? And I didn't even know what it meant. But I knew it was exciting, and I knew that I wanted to have more of that. And whilst that was taking place, I was doing the sort of standard milk rounds as part and parcel of the end of the masters. Um, and I went to a wedding, and I met a guy called Ralph Craythorne, who was James Farrell's boss, and you've interviewed James Farrell on this podcast. Um, and Ralph met me in the nave of this church. The wedding had finished, and Ralph and I were talking about his values, his business in Canterbury, where he was the partner of Strutt and Parker. And he spoke to me in a way that absolutely set me on fire. Ralph was talking about the amazing connection he had with his clients, the wisdom that he was able to impart, the connection he had with them, and it really set me on fire listening to him. And I thought, if I could work for someone like that, it would take me somewhere much further, much more interesting than this eco stove project. I've learned a lot from the eco stove project, and it's brought me this far, and it's given me a buzz for entrepreneurship. But the guy that was the angel investor, he was, we didn't, I didn't get the sort of a sense of admiration for him. I thanked him for everything he taught me, but he wasn't a leader. But Ralph was this like, he was just this giant in my mind. And I thought, I'm going to go and work for him. And so I took the entrepreneurship stuff, thinking, I'm sure there'll be a space for this in my career one day, but I want to be around this guy. So he offered me a job without telling the the recruitment team in Strutt and Parker that he'd offered me a job. And I wrote to them saying, "Thanks, I'd like to accept the job." And they were like, "What do you mean? You haven't given you a job?" And I was like, "But no, but Ralph has." And they were like, "Oh, he's done it again."
Maybe that's a really good tactic for like exciting young. I'm going to screw myself over with this. We're going to get loads of people who write to us accepting the job we haven't offered them now. I mean, it's not a bad tactic, is it?
So that was it. So I am going to come back to how I got into viticulture. This is I am taking you there.
The winding journey is the best ones.
Yeah. So I ended up working in Canterbury with Strutt and Parker under Ralph Craythorne and a couple of like Nigel, who I mentioned, the guy who was doing the job, buying the farm for the Taittinger family. And so I started in land agency through that sort of avenue, I suppose.
I love how you were collecting characters and skill sets along the way. But I view kind of like mentors as like rungs of ladders. You learn everything you can, you're respectful, you're appreciative. Hopefully, when it works well, you can teach them something on the way past as well.
Yeah,
But then the next person that can help you and the next person that can help you.
absolutely.
Who's the
Yeah.
next one you're going to introduce us to in your story?
Um. Well, I so let's jump forwards to what we just bought that that vineyard, that apple orchard for the Taittinger family, and they created a UK outpost of their brand called Domaine Evremond. And Domaine Evremond, named after Charles de Saint Evremond, who was the first Frenchman to make the wines of Champagne famous in the court of Charles II. Famous and popular.
Do you know why they opted for a distinct brand and marketing position as opposed to just Taittinger UK?
Yeah, so there's a couple of reasons. One is that I think they wanted to keep the Taittinger brand sort of linear, unique, distinct. It's a beloved brand. and they didn't want to tamper with that. I think that's probably the first answer. The second answer is that um, Pierre-Emmanuel Taittinger, who was the president of the Champagne House at the time, he is a historian with a great love for the sort of Anglo-French alliances throughout both world wars. He worked for Stone's Green Ginger Wine, which is a sort of ancient English brand when he was in his teens, living in London, and he wanted to create a new brand that was anchored in that Franco-English partnership. And Charles de Saint-Evremond was the first Frenchman that really, in the context of wine, embodied that Franco-English partnership. I mean, for example, he's the only Frenchman buried in Poets' Corner in Westminster Cathedral, because he brought his love of poetry, his love of music, his love of wine to the court of Charles II, and there was something about that connection that Pierre Emmanuel really respected, and so named the brand after him, Domaine Evremond.
Would a does a glass of wine taste different depending on the music you're listening to?
um, oh, I yes, yeah, there we are. There's the answer. Yes,
Context is everything, right?
well, yeah, it certainly tastes different. It tastes different at different temperatures. It tastes different according to how hydrated you are. Um, for me, I get really excited about wine where I've had a story. I've been part of the story previously because I'll taste it and it will remind me of um, so 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 much of wine is to do with the soil that's grown in. And you could give me two different wines, one from the chalky downlands of the village of Chilham, or one from the sort of more loamy clay soils of the Weald where Balfour Winery is, and I could tell you which one was which because that loam and that clay gives it this very sort of fruity, very fruit forward, very full bodied flavor. And that's the exciting thing about wine for me is that you can pinpoint it to where it is. It's all about place and provenance and soil. And so off the back of the Taittinger news, the Domaine Evremond news, and so for context, when I say the news, they mentioned Stratton Parker in their press release, and which they didn't have to do, but they did, which was really kind of them. And then that hit the global press in a huge way because it was the first champagne house ever to plant vines in the UK, with a view to making English sparkling wine. And so that meant that we were sort of catapulted into this position where we were on the front of the wave. And
Did you
so,
ever ask them why? In
sorry,
terms of, did you ever ask them why now?
yeah, well, it's because it's always been about friendship. It's been about Patrick McGrath and Pierre Emmanuel Taittinger and the Cadogan family, who were also shareholders. They were all great friends, and through the process, we became great friends with them. And so out of that friendship, they 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 wanted to celebrate what we had done. They wanted to celebrate the company we were working for at the time, and they did it because they felt it was the sort of thing that friends would do for each other, which is really nice.
Love it. My gut call, sort of, hearing the story would have been it was climate related, it was land related, it was all those factors, and maybe they did play a part in that. But the fact that friendship was such a poignant part of it is really lovely.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, it was to do with the changing climate. It was to do with the perfect soil conditions, but really, it was about two friends wanting to do a project together. Um, so that transaction had happened. The press release had been released. The global press had picked it up, and then I thought, well, this is great. I'm on the front of a wave here. And as I said, I'd spotted in Patrick this sort of entrepreneurial flair, which I hadn't seen in many other clients that I'd worked for, and I just wanted more of that. So I started cold calling and cold emailing all the CEOs and managing directors and owners of English wine businesses, saying, "I've just done this. Could I do the same for you? Could I find land for you? Could I?" I was listing off things that I was completely incapable of doing, saying, "Oh, I could find investors for you. I could, sell your businesses for you, whatever it was." And then this guy called Richard Balfour, he came back to me saying, "Actually, we are looking for more people to grow grapes for us. So could you please go out and find Could you please go out and find farmers that would be able to plant vines and sell the grapes to us?" And I thought, "Shit, I don't know how to do this." And so I then opened. You can go on to there's like a number of different websites which give you what you need to basically find the ingredients for a perfect site, a perfect vineyard site, which are soil, altitude, slope orientation, the sort of gradient of the slope, whether there are services underneath it like water pipes, gas pipes, oil pipes. Um, and so I had these different tabs open and I was moving them around. So I'd find a piece of chalk using the Cranfield University soilscapes. I'd find a piece of chalk and they look like fingers of chalk running through the countryside. And you go, okay, there's a bit there. You then close that down, open land registry title and work out who owns it. And you can find the polygon of the shape of their land registry title. And you go, yeah, that looks like it was probably over that piece of soil, but it's quite difficult to see because the resolution is different, scale's different. Close that tab, open another tab, and look for the elevation and go, oh, it's too high. Because you don't plant above 150 meters in the UK because the higher you go, the more wind, the cooler it gets. And we're a marginal climate anyway. So cooling a marginal climate means you're too cold. So then you discount it because it was like 200 meters above sea level. So you start again with another piece of soil, and the whole thing took ages. And but I kept doing it because I felt like it was something that I'd I'd occupied that space early on. No one else was doing it, and I had the backing of Richard say, go and do this." And
Do you know what blue ocean thinking is?
uh, I've heard of it, but I wouldn't explain it in the way that I'm sure you could explain it.
There's a business philosophy about when you find an opportunity and you're the first one to get there, you're swimming in a blue ocean.
Yep.
If it's say you were going to launch a renewable energy firm right now,
Mm.
how do you differentiate? And they'd call that a red
The
ocean
red ocean. Yeah.
environment because it's a shark
Yep.
feeding frenzy.
Yeah.
You were in that blue ocean. You were the
I,
first to get there.
you're right. I was in the blue ocean.
And no one else could have got there if you think about it, because you had the entrepreneurial aspect, you had the historic, family awareness and ownership of land and how people operate in those ways. So you had the cultural norms, you had the ability to speak to people, you were brave enough to put yourself out there and fail. So you were the only one who could have occupied it at that time, probably.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Um, and then we I was playing cricket, and there's a guy called Pete Wayne who was a cartologist, and Nigel, back to Nigel Porter, my old boss.
Uh,
He
Batting, bowling, where
I'm
did you?
a bowler.
Okay. Of what
Yeah.
variety?
I generally open, so I'm sort of fast bowler. Although since I've had kids, I haven't I haven't played a cricket match in about 7 or 8 years. But I used to play quite a lot of cricket. And Pete Wayne was batting for the opposition. And we met afterwards, and we were talking about the project I was doing. And he said, "Oh, I'm a cartologist. I could make you a map that combines all of those things." And lo and behold, he came back with a base map using ArcGIS data, which I guess you guys are familiar with.
Had you ever heard of JS at that point?
No, no, I hadn't. No. And so he said, "Look, this is a Google Earth map. I'm going to click this button." And then he laid over it the Cranfield soilscape. And so you could see the whole of the countryside, but there was like a translucent layer of different soil types. And I was like, well, that's a bit clever. And then he clicked another button, and it was the elevation. So I could see all the contours that gave me not just the elevation, but also the slope direction and the gradient. And I was like, oh my God, this would save me years if I could use this. And so we started negotiating like, oh, I mean, maybe we have like an upfront payment and then a percentage of any things that I really, really wanted it. And then Nigel got permission and support from the head office for me to have it. And then I was away. I was absolutely away. And so I basically mapped all of the landowners of any significant land parcels in Kent. And I knew them all by name. I had their mobile phone numbers. I'd cold called all of them saying, "Hi, I'm Ed. I'm acting for a wine producer. Any chance we could buy or rent your land? We want to turn it into a vineyard." And you think they'll say, "Oh, no, piss off." Because that's the sort of double glazing story, isn't it? But people, it's such a curiosity. Like vineyards, they prick people's ears up in a way that you wouldn't ever imagine. And so I was just pushing at this open door, and it was
Why
amazing
why does it have a magic and a majesty that an orchard doesn't?
because apples are commodities, bottles of wine have a label, and so it takes you back to a place. So for the listeners, above us are these lovely A-frames with like a traditional roof structure, and then the you've got the wine brands like printed onto the old wine boxes, right? So you've got Chateau Latour, you've got wine from Haute Medoc, you've got Grand Vin, so that's from Latour.
Yeah, Andrew, the previous owner, was a huge wine
Yeah,
connoisseur.
and so all of those bottles of wine take you back to a grid reference, to a place. And if you're selling apples, you wouldn't know unless they put on the label, "Oh, these are from, Mansfield in Kent." You wouldn't know where they came from. But there's something about wine that gives it provenance and it gives it a sense of premium value, and people just loved it. And so, yeah,
That's exactly why we will not sell a carbon credit as a commodity. So if someone's going to buy a carbon credit with us, they buy the entire project at a place.
right, okay,
So they
nice.
own that partnership and that relationship because we've got premium carbon credits. So we were really fortunate to break the world record for the highest price paid for a carbon credit this year.
Mm,
The market would sell you something in the UK between 35 and 45 pounds a credit.
mhm,
We sold at 125 pounds a credit because every aspect of it was premium and it had a story and provenance and place and legacy and longevity and all those things that people are prepared to pay for.
yeah. So you're not selling credits really. You're selling you're selling an opportunity to be part of a story.
Yes. And so Burgess Salmon, the law firm,
Yeah,
bought those credits from us. Um, the reason we agreed to sell to Burgess Salmon is I wanted to sell to the group that would have the hardest DD possible.
right.
So if you've been DD'd by a law firm,
Yeah,
and bear in mind they've worked with us for 4 years,
yeah,
so they've DD'd us for 4 years. One of their team was brilliant. They said it's not possible to fake authenticity for 4 years.
yeah, yeah,
So they came, their entire senior management team have visited multiple times. That's another feature of our credits. You can come and see, touch, feel, experience the estate where your credits are.
yeah.
So they came and recorded video footage with us for their AGM. So
Nice.
they literally, in context, to say to people, this is the reality of what we're doing. Everyone wants us to do things for the environment, for climate, for biodiversity. We really are. And they couldn't do that with anyone else.
Mm, yeah. I don't think other people have cottoned on to the power of story in the same in the carbon credit space. It's
Not in the
it's a very
slightest.
commoditized. It's very like, particularly those in like the involuntary market. They've just got to do it. They just do it for the least amount that they have to pay, and they've ticked that box. And let's move on.
I met a guy at a conference earlier this week that was in the room when the concept of a voluntary carbon credit was invented.
Hmm.
And I said, I really appreciate you did that, but you shouldn't have called it voluntary. He's like, I bloody know. I told him it should have been called private. Voluntary means you don't have to do it, doesn't it? I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Marketing problem. Marketing and storytelling is it's one of the biggest points of differentiation for us as a business.
Mm.
So we're just closing our intern round for this year. In 2 weeks, we had 1,600 applicants
Oh,
because of the brand and the story.
yeah.
If you want to work somewhere really cool in the environment sector, where else are you going?
Yeah. Yeah. It's there is a whether it's right or wrong, there is this sort of there is this perception that the environment sector is quite sort of, you're 50 plus.
Test cricket.
Yeah, it is a bit. It's quite slow. It's quite sort of civic. It's not very imaginative.
It's the purview of the retiree planting a tree on a Sunday,
Yeah, quite.
whereas we're playing T20 in the IPL at a pace no one's ever seen before.
Yeah, I like that.
The analogy is perfect. I
It
can only
is.
use it with cricket fans.
Yeah, no, I'm
but
with you all the way.
Test
Absolutely.
to IP, it's literally, and where it's especially good is test cricket, accumulation slowly over time, take no
Mm,
risks, environment sector. IPL, run rate, return on investment is what's required.
mm,
That's why one of the reasons we've been able to do what we've done so quickly is we've recognized we've recognized the game's different.
mm.
Love a cricket analogy. I was a leg spinner, left arm leg spinner.
Nice.
Yeah, at the days when you weren't really supposed to be.
Right.
So whereas
So,
now it'd be like, wow, that's a real point of differentiation. That works really well. Then it was like, are you sure you wouldn't rather bowl right-handed? I'm like, I can't. Yeah.
so Shane Warne must be one of your favourite.
Yes, I adored Shane Warne. One of the
That
first,
ball.
ball of the century. I think I get so excited by those transcendent moments that move something forward a decade in a day. Shane
Mm,
Warne doing that. There's a basketball player called Vince Carter who in the 1990s turned up at a slam dunk competition, jumped so high, spun 360 degrees in midair, put the ball between his legs and dunked it. They just stopped the competition. They were like, done. Usain Bolt, when he broke the world record on the 100 and he's looking at the rest of the field as he does it,
yeah.
there's these elements in sport where it's a leap.
Yeah.
When the Tesla Model S arrived, we went from Prius being a joke to, oh my God, the world's arrived. That's what we've always aspired to do.
Mm,
We wanted to go, no, no, no. I still joke about the environment sector that you'll get a press release for a 30 grand project.
mm,
We've got a 300 million pound portfolio. If we'd have sat here 4 years ago and said, in fact, when I said we'll have a 100 million pound portfolio, I literally got laughed at. And we've now got a 300 million pound one. We need those moments, those transcendent iPhone moments, things that leap forward.
mm.
You had that transaction. Without that Taittinger transaction,
Yeah.
that was a decade and a day.
It was. It really was, actually. Um, yeah, I look back at it as one of the most important milestones in my career. It changed my career. I haven't sold a farm since. It's just been vineyards. So we come on to Richard Balfour Lynn, and so he'd given me this mandate to go out and find farmers to make grapes for him, and he'd buy the grapes from them. And then we had that map made by Pete Wayne, and then we started mapping all of these different land registry titles, and we
Do
started
you
doing.
have the IP for that now?
Um, we don't have the IP for it because Pete was making it as an independent contractor, but we have the relationships. So when I moved from Stratton Parker to Canterbury, I rang all the people that I'd been in touch with just to say, just to let you know that if you wanted to get hold of me, I wouldn't be at Stratton Parker anymore. And they all got their diaries out on the phone. And they all changed. And one person he got a purple pen and put a bunch of grapes around my name, so he remembered who I was. And what I had was relationships.
So it doesn't change either. It's a do once activity. Like the land's not changing at a pace whereby that's different.
Yeah,
Whereas if you were doing the equivalent for tech or data, that it's live, it's adjusting every day.
yeah.
So the IP is less relevant. It's the knowledge once, a snapshot.
But also, it's why do you go to the same restaurant? Why do you go to your favorite restaurant? It's because you know that the maitre d' will make you feel welcome. He knows what your favorite table is. He knows that you prefer drinking this type of wine or that type of wine, or that you enjoy your steak medium rare rather than well done. It's it's that sort of hospitality connection which you never get taught at university. You only pick it up on weekend jobs, but it lives with you in your career in a way that no one can understand unless they've done it. And that is like 80% of my job is, you know, I'm back in the White Hart. I'm collecting glasses, making jokes with the bar staff, making jokes with the customers, and I do that in my work. And you can't have an IP for that. It's down to the way that you build a connection with someone yourself.
Love it. Take us forward in the story.
So Richard Balfour Lynn was the CEO of Warwick Balfour, which was a sort of property and hotel company. He owned Hotel de Vin, Liberties, Malmaison. He owned 130 hotels. He was a proper property magnate. Um, and some people say he's a difficult person to deal with. I love dealing with Richard Balfour Lynn. He has very high expectations, but if you meet them, you feel like you're on fire. It's really, really exciting working for him. And I talked about how you've got like the landowners of yesteryear who are sort of frightfully delighted if you've renewed the FBT or something. And Richard, he just kept pushing me into spaces. I was like, oh, I'm not sure I can do that. And he'd push me, and he asked me to produce a valuation once using a discounted cash flow. Um, and I was like, I wasn't taught that at university. And he was like, well, we've got to find a way of, I want to give you this push. Um,
What do you think he saw in you to want to push you?
well, he said it was trust. Yeah. He said that trust was the most important thing. And that's why he wanted to work with me. And so he wanted to push me.
Why do you think he trusted you?
Um, I think because I saw him as someone that could teach me. And so there are I don't know, there are lots of jobs that I did where they weren't like an economic success with him because he was quite hard a negotiator. But I've just wanted to spend as much time with him as possible, on the phone or walking around the Hushheath estate where the Balfour Winery is based, just sort of soaking up all of this knowledge, like the way that he'd structure a loan agreement or the way that he would structure a grape purchase agreement. It's so different. and he was de-risking his business the whole time. And every decision it's got a stack of reasons behind it. But if you missed out on the reasons, you would never make the same decision again in the future if you were running the same business. So if you didn't know the reasons, then you'd be lost. And like the perks of my job are that I get to try English wine and meet these interesting people, but the privilege is you get to absorb their knowledge. And I think he worked out I was doing that. And so he thought, okay, I'll I think the trust came from there, basically. And so at the same time, I was trying to sell another wine business. And previously, people that were buying wine businesses, they were like retired city guys or girls who would
Hobbies.
hobbies, yeah. So they'd made a packet and they want to have fun with their money. And we were trying to sell this wine business, and then a company called the Adorium Group, which is like an investment panel for people that want to invest specifically into luxury goods, watches, cars, um, like sort of chalets in the Alps,
Artwork.
artwork, exactly. And then their operations and finance director turned up at this vineyard, and they wanted to buy this vineyard because they could place the best wines on the best tables, the best restaurants in the best cities around the world. And I thought, this is a completely different type of purchaser. And at the same time, Richard was saying, could you do this DCF? And I thought, if I'm going to remain relevant, I've got to retrain. So the next day, I applied to do the executive MBA at Cranford University for 2 years. Started in 2018, and that was epic. It was just all of the things that I was learning in work. Um, And I could ask these questions about, "Oh, how would you do that in the context of a wine business?" And the next lecturers are like, "Who's this prick asking me about wine?" Trying to make it all relevant to what I was doing in work. And through like 2 years of doing the MBA, learning about, valuations, learning about economics, learning about, new venture creation, um, it was a real validation for me of I hadn't done that well in school, and you tell a story, you tell a story to yourself about how good or bad you are academically, and then I was put in this environment where I had this real urge to try and move on with viticulture and remain at the front of the wave in this changing, emerging market of what was looking like it was going to be mergers and acquisitions in English wine. And I had these lecturers who were giving me this information about how you would value a business using a DCF or using EBITDA multiples, and you think this is epic. I'm going to use this in English wine. And I'm going to keep in that blue ocean, like you're saying. And then I finished my course, came back, was working with Richard to do the DCF, did the valuation, um, and you just think it it felt like a small step and a massive step at the same time. You know what I mean?
Do you know the difference between school and the MBA, right?
I think the difference. So in our school, we had like a set system, sets 1 to 5, and I was like a sort of pretty steady 4 set candidate. And so you're surrounded by people that are also 4 set candidates, and the best way you can tell what someone's like is to see the people they hang around with. And I felt like I was sort of in this environment where I was kind of categorized by my set number and my my peers in that set. And then when you got to the MBA, it's like a very like free for all flat. You're doing an MBA, so you sort of you retell the story of who you are and how smart you are and how capable you are according to your environment. And I thought, actually, I'm going to rewrite this script.
Interesting. That's not my read. My read, it's the opportunity to apply.
Mm,
So
yeah,
because you had a forum to take that learning and you were everything you read, you accessed, you were applying to wine, you were applying to somewhere to use it,
yeah, that's
whereas
true.
previously it was conceptual. So
Yeah,
do you read much now?
yeah. I do, I read a lot of like pop psychology, and I read. Yeah. The answer is yes. I do read a fair amount.
So when I read now, so I didn't read early in life. I came to reading pretty late because my lovely wife made me a better human being and told me I could stop moaning about being bored when I'd read a book. Um, so when I read now, I read with a highlighter pen and scribble in the margins of everything I read as well. And it's reading to apply to the business.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
the absence of an outlet for that, it was pointless. Like I never liked running. I didn't mind chasing a ball. I needed a purpose to go get something.
Yep.
Um, I think you're addicted to learning,
Ye Maybe I am. Yeah, maybe I am.
and it's wonderful. What a brilliantly socially acceptable addiction. So
yeah,
mine is our business
yeah,
and lifting weights.
yeah.
They're both,
Nice.
as far as it goes, they're pretty good ones to have.
Yeah.
Like it could be a lot worse. The yeah, the application side of it's fascinating. So we were away with the family last week. I read a book on how to win a Formula One Grand Prix by Bernie Collins, the strategist that was at
Right. Yeah.
Aston Martin. And then I'm reading a book on the business decisions of Taylor Swift.
No way.
The application of these, so you can tell how good I think a book is by how much highlighter pen and scribbles there are in the
Yeah.
margin.
How dog-eared it is.
And the team know because they just get screenshots of all these things. The sort of marketing philosophy and ideas behind how Taylor Swift branded her eras, there's so much OC crossover on it. It's ridiculous. But in the absence of applying it to something, it's just there's no value to it to me. There's no purpose.
Mm.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Have you read Unreasonable Hospitality?
So James Farrell's, that's his new sort of favorite book. And
There's an outside chance that might be my fault.
so I've been I've read a lot of highlights of it.
Yeah.
I haven't read the whole book. I'm going to be completely
Okay.
honest. But I I I leapt at it as a
Of course you
concept
did. Yeah.
because it just, it reminded me of, well, effectively I'm in the service industry. And so whether you're serving
And at the premium end of it.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's my next book.
Absolutely. And I'm going to send you a book called Crickonomics as well,
Okay.
which is amazing. If you're a cricket geek, I will tell one story on Crickonomics. So our amazing genius natural capital director, Chris Winter, he had laser eye surgery the year before last. And he's a nightmare. Like his brain works all the time. So when he had his laser eye surgery, I sent him and his wife a massive box of chocolates with a note that says, half of these are for Chris, half of them are for you putting up with Chris when this happens. So he'd been through like so many audiobooks and things like 3 days into his not being able to see. I get a note going, thank you for recommending Crickonomics. Slightly unfortunate, Lizzie put it on play as she went out, and there are 47 pages of stats tables at the end. And he couldn't see, so it was an audio book. So he had stats read to him for 47 pages and couldn't turn it off because he couldn't find the phone. It's the greatest thing that ever. I wish I'd meant to do that, and only hates cricket. So yeah, and refuses to believe I love it. So
Wow.
forgive me. Let's take you back to Cranfield. Changing
Oh yeah. So
chapter.
yeah, it was important for me because I was like reorientating. I was reorientating my opinion of my ability in like an academic sense. Um, and I remember, I flunked maths at school. Then we got 80% in economics at Cranfield, and then we took it in turns to lead on these different modules, and I was leading on the new venture creation module, and we had a client at the time who'd bought a farm in the southwest near um, 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 near Bridport, and they wanted to turn it into like a wine retreat. So I used that as the basis for the business plan that we did, and we got like 97% for it. And I just remember thinking, wait a second, I can do this. I can do this. And it was
How fucked up is our education system
yeah,
when someone as creative and as um, intellectually agile as you didn't think they could do that? It's not fit for entrepreneurs though, right? How many stories is there of, Richard Branson being the best one of those?
yeah.
There are elements of his approach that are clearly mirrored in yours, vice versa. It's not meant for people with free thinking, different mindsets.
I agree. I agree. So that it was great for so many reasons because it kept me ahead of the game in my industry, and I can talk about that. But it also it reorientated my perception of what I could and couldn't do in a workplace or in a sort of. And I remember previously sometimes I'd be speaking with people who were were much cleverer than I was, and I'd sometimes think to myself, I'm not sure I can. I'm not sure I can do this. Um, and more recently, I've found myself thinking this this is really interesting. I definitely can do this, and it sounds so basic, but it completely alters whether you lean in or lean out to work. And I found it really freeing, really freeing. And so we then started this.
Just on that, it's
Mm,
the Henry Ford thing. Whether you think you can or you think you can't,
you're
you're
right.
probably right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And it's so right.
Your whole thing about staying ahead of the game.
Yeah,
That's not because you want to be ahead. That's because you're scared of falling behind, right?
Yes, that's interesting, isn't it? I think it's because I could see the industry was changing in terms of the people that were coming in, and I got such a buzz out of working with people like Richard and people like Patrick, and I was thinking, who's the next person that's going to come into the industry? What can I learn from them? And I want to always be in the middle of the best jobs in the industry. Um, and maybe there is a bit of a fear that I'd fall back and I'd be like yesterday's land agent or yesterday's vineyard agent. Um, but for me, I think what really bubbles up when you ask me that question is I I get to do this as a job, and I want to do the most fun, like biggest ticket items with the boldest aspirations. I think it would just be how fun is it to do that?
Well, imagine getting out of bed to do anything else. Like if you can't jump out of bed in the morning to do the thing you're excited about, why would you do it?
Yeah,
Like go
agreed.
chase the so this is a secret we shouldn't really tell anyone, but this is why I love this podcast. Because I get to sit down with amazing people, learn their stories, hear them tell their stories, and learn everything from them for a couple of hours. What's better than that?
Yeah, it's cool, isn't
And
it?
it's the biggest like gift I've ever been given in terms. I mean, I've been very lucky. I've had a lot of opportunities through OC and privileged to be part of it every day. God, it's not I have to; it's I get to do this.
Yeah, I agree.
Felt so fortunate.
I've listened to a number of your podcasts, and the 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 way that you have built this, the way that you've the way that you've arrived in this situation through um previously you were at it begins with S, that company you were with,
Sanctus,
Sanctus, that's
yeah,
right. And then previously with the Environment Agency, and you can see all the breadcrumbs that bring you here. But it's so exciting reading your story.
it's very kind.
It's yeah. So
You'd like the owner at Sanctus. So
yeah.
I think it's 300. You've maybe heard of him, a guy called Peter Cook. He's just starting he's 3 or 4 years into a wine brand called Kingsthorne,
Mm,
in the Forest of Dean, place called Flaxley Abbey. He bought a huge area there. I think he's got 200 or 300 acres of vines down now. And yeah, I
wow,
should connect you up. He's really crazy into his wine.
thank you.
Yeah, gone really hard after that, but the company's brilliant.
So interestingly, the interview that you had at Sanctus sounds a lot like the interview I had with James Farrell and
Oh,
Mike
interesting.
Frank.
Cool. Take us there.
So we've skipped on now to moving to like
You had a transition period from Stratton Parker to
yeah. So when James left, it's typical with lots of different contracts where you can't solicit to employ people that were previously in your previous workplace, and that lasts for a period of time. And I'd made a note of when that period of time ended with James. It was the 4th of September.
let's just shout that out on the way past. People adore that man,
They do.
like literally. And I've heard multiple people tell the story about when he stepped away from Stratton Parker. People were crying in the room when it was announced, and were literally waiting until he picked up the phone to come.
Yeah. Yeah, that's about right.
You're a star.
Yeah. And the thing, James, he's a bit like, I said that Nigel Porter sort of would give me a long leash. What James is great at is that he knows what people's strengths and weaknesses are. And he knows how to use them. He knows how to use me. And he would give me opportunities that I wasn't quite ready for, but he'd back me and he'd put me in that space. And
I'm going to challenge you on that a sec. I think you were ready for them. I think as you tell your story, you just weren't sure you were, but you probably were. And you were very good at positioning yourself, whether consciously or not, with those mentors that would see it in you before you did. So instead of trusting yourself, you trusted them. You were probably always ready.
yeah, well, I think you're right. I think what I'd say is in corporate worlds, people often get attached to the stage they're at, and like you're an associate or an associate director or whatever. And he would give me speaking roles that would normally go to directors, even though I was like a sort of senior surveyor. And I'm like, "Are you sure you want me to do that?" He's like, "Yeah, go and do it." And so he knew how to use me in that space. Um, and so yeah, I knew that his non compete ended on the 4th of September, and I needed and he lives in like the arse end of Yorkshire.
He
Um,
lives in the poshest bit of Yorkshire. He lives in Harrogate.
well, yeah, okay, but I'm from South Wales.
That's in the
So
Yorkshire. I can take you to the arse end of Yorkshire. You don't want to go there.
So anyway, so I'm a vineyard agent, and all the vineyards are in the southeast. I live in Wales, okay? And if you're not familiar with the UK geography, if you have a triangle, Wales is on the left, southeast is on the right, and Yorkshire is at the top. And I was
Yes,
like,
it
how
is.
on earth do I explain to my bosses that I've gone to Yorkshire when I'm in the vineyard game? And then I Googled Yorkshire vineyards, and there is a vineyard called Borough Bridge, about 5 or 6 miles from where James lives. And so I then rang them saying, "Oh, can I come and speak to you? I've heard about this award you won. I'd love to come and speak to you." And they were like, "Yeah, we'd be delighted." And so suddenly I had this like legitimate reason to go up to Yorkshire.
My PhD fieldwork was done at Borough Bridge,
Oh, really?
literally in the River Wharfe that flows through it. I studied that river for my PhD. I haven't heard that name in 20 years. God, I'm old. Anyway.
So I then was in touch with James, and I said, "Oh, I've got a meeting in Borough Bridge on the 6th of September, 2 days after his golden handcuffs ended." Um,
Did he know it was that day?
yeah, he did. Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah. And he'd made no attempt to invite me to.
For the lawyers listening, there was no attempt before that date to.
Yes, correct. Thank
Yes.
you. And then on the 6th of September, which is 2 days after the golden handcuffs came off, I was in Borough Bridge, and he said, "Oh, if you're passing by, then I live not far away." And I was like, "Oh, really? Just come by for a coffee if you want." So I turned up at his door, and he's got this really nice house with this lovely lake, and there was someone in like a high vis jacket clearing leaves out of the lake. And I was like, "Oh, who's that?" And he goes, "Oh, it's my wife." And I was like, "Epic." It's absolutely epic. And then he said to me, if you were to work for Knight Frank, what would your job be?" And I was like, "Right, okay, well, I'd probably do a bit of placemaking, do a bit of viticulture. I'd probably try and like flesh out the MBA stuff that I've been doing and try and sort of stay relevant in the sort of mergers and acquisition space of viticulture." And he was like, "Okay, would you like a job on that basis?" And I was like, "Yes, please. I'd love that." Uh, which it sounds very similar to your job offer at Sanctus, where they were like, "Rich, what do you want to come and do for us?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put as much talent on the field as you can. Like that's the key bit. Put talented people around you that are better than you, can help you improve at things. I'll go back to a cricket analogy. We're working on our middle order batting a lot at the moment.
Right.
So we have an amazing intern program that brings people in at the beginning of their career. I'm mixing metaphors between time and batting order here, but bear with me. And what we've now got to the point of is we've got the first run of people where people who joined us as interns are getting their interns this year.
Oh, wow.
So rather than being like early career professionals, we're moving them into the middle of the batting order, and they're going to have people to come in to work with them. And I always think about the sort of great Indian and English teams that won the sort of one day and T20 World Cups. It was that middle batting order that you've got 4 or 5 of them that one of them's going to get a century. Just depends whose day it is, but you've got enough talent at the core of a business. So people 3, 4, 5 years into their career, still really early, but incredibly talented. What we've been able to do is get literally like 10-year talent out of people in 3 or 4 years into their career because of the culture we've built around them. That's what's really exciting for us at the moment.
Yeah. So James and Ralph, I mentioned earlier, they've always been strong on be generous with your time as leaders, because you're giving your knowledge, your wisdom, your experience to people that are coming up and that are hungry to learn it. And so they inherit the years that you've worked ahead of them.
It's asset management. I've just realized recently my approach to asset management is the same as talent management. Only invest in it. Don't spend money on resource, invest money in resource. If you do not believe every penny you are investing in a person will benefit them and you to a greater extent with a return on that, don't do it. So where we've had people come into the business who have been okay and solid, they've gone pretty quick because we're not about that. We're hiring people, even at an intern level. Are you going to be a middle order batsman in a few years? Are you going to be a head of? Are you going to be a director? If not, I'm sorry, there's not room. We're a really small team. We're 30 people in the central team, just north of 50 across the UK. For the geography we cover, for 50,000 acres and 12 estates, that's a small team. There's not enough room. Our view is we can only have so many people on the field, let them all be insanely talented. And when you do that, you get a multiple of that talent. because everyone makes everyone. I've seen it in your teams. Like James brought a ton of the team up to Invergeldy with us. Everyone made somebody else better. It was a multiplier effect, better than an addition.
Yeah, that's right.
So how many years with Knight Frank now?
Oh, 4, 5. Yeah.
And how things evolved from that first day of, so the job title essentially to what it looks like today.
It's evolved. It's evolved along with the way the market has changed. So viticulture in the UK has changed a lot in 4 years. When I first joined, everyone was rushing out to plant new vines. They were still sort of dizzy off the hype of Champagne Taittinger coming into the market. Lots of people were making really fabulous wines, winning sort of blind tasting awards alongside wines of champagne, and it was a sort of this like golden couple of years. And then in 2023, we had the biggest harvest we've ever had, not just in the UK, but also on the continent. And there was this huge quantity of grapes and therefore wine that was produced. And sales weren't keeping up with production. So production.
What's the time lag between that grape harvest and it hitting the market in terms of bottled product going to a customer?
So it depends. If you're making still wine, it's about 6 months.
Okay.
If you're making sparkling wine, it can be anywhere from 2 years to 7 years, according to how premium that product is.
So we're still seeing that coming to the 2023 sparkling coming to market now.
Yeah, there'll be no 23 sparkling wine in the market yet.
Okay.
So all that wine is in tank, or it's probably in bottle somewhere in the southeast in a warehouse. But you pay for that wine in that year. Well, you pay for it. You pay to bottle it in the April following the harvest. So the wine that was crushed, the grapes that were crushed this year, it'll be bottled in April next year. So if you look at someone's cash flow, if they're making, I don't know, 100,000 bottles of wine, sparkling wine, it's about £1.50 to bottle of wine. Put the juice into the glass, put the crown cap on, lay it down. You have to have 150 grand in your bank account in April next year for that to go away, and you won't see that until 2028 as a minimum. So that you can imagine the working capital profile of English wine business is down, 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 down. Then it starts to come back up again. Then you bottle it goes down again. It comes up again. It goes down again. So you have to have incredible wealth, or you have to have an incredibly understanding bank manager. And that's why it's so exciting from my perspective, because the people that can understand and tolerate and make a business out of that working capital profile are extraordinary entrepreneurs. And because I'm selling their businesses for them, they don't want their team to know. So I have direct access to these business owners. So it's like going to university every day. You pick up the phone to ex-CEO of some oil and gas company who's started a wine business, or someone that was a hospitality magnate, or somebody that has a wine distribution business. And they'll ring me like twice a week, and we'll be on the phone for 30, 40 minutes, and they'll be taking me through their strategy, and they'll be asking my advice. Can you believe it? My advice. And these people,
Yes, I can believe it.
it's just unbelievable.
Do you know who Mr. Beast is?
I do, but I don't know why.
So he's like the most famous YouTube content producer.
Oh,
in the
yeah,
world.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So one of his favorite things to do is, and bear in mind, the guy, what was the stat? Like 50% of everyone on the planet has seen one of his videos or something. It's ridiculous. Hundreds of millions of viewers. One of his favorite things to do is he literally will ring someone up and say, "Hello, it's teach me something." So just randomly through his phone book, and effectively you've got a gateway to doing the exact same
I
thing.
do, yeah. So he was on Stephen Bartlett's podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I know who he is.
So I haven't actually watched any of his videos, but I've listened to lots of his podcasts because, I mean, he's 27 or something now and speaks like a Harvard professor in terms of his knowledge of business. But he's putting the reps, right, from being like a 14-year-old kid every day, just doing this and getting better and better and better and iterating. All his videos from when he first started are still online. So you can see his entire progression. Imagine the bravery of keeping that out there. Like, so I write a lot and I think about some of the early things I wrote and they're just garbage. They do say if you're not embarrassed about your old work, you're not progressing fast enough.
Yeah, quite.
Where I want to go next is sort of wine in general. So you and Ben were having a great conversation when we walked in about how British wine was previously viewed.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so English wine from yesteryear was always seen as a bit of a joke in sort of like international markets, and we were making sort of Germanic styles of wine using varieties that aren't popular anymore, like Reichensteiner and Save and Ortega and Müller-Thurgau. They're sort of like quite high natural sugar levels, and they cope in a sort of cold, damp climate, which is what we used to be as a country. And they tasted very grapey. They were still wines, and the old joke was, how many people does it take to drink a glass of English wine? The answer's four. There's the person that drinks it, two people to hold him down, and one to pour it down his throat. And that was really how English wine was seen. And then there were this American couple called Stuart and Sandy Ross, and Stuart, who recently died, actually. He 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 was like an amateur climatologist who realized that the growing season temperature, which is the temperature between 1st of April, 31st of October in the northern hemisphere, and it's the opposite in the southern hemisphere. He noticed it was creeping up to around about 13.5 degrees Celsius in the UK. And the reason why that's relevant is because every single grape variety has got its own sort of comfort zone, which is like a sort of 4 to 5 degrees Celsius window, has its own comfort zone of where and at what temperature it needs to grow. And the moment you get into 13 to 16 degrees Celsius, you're in the sort of comfort zone for Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and they are the sparkling wine varieties that the wines of Champagne are famous for. And so and his wife flew from America to the UK, and they planted the first sparkling wine vineyard in a place called Ridgeview, which is near Haywards Heath in Sussex. And they made a field blend, which is a blend of different varieties in the same vineyard, in 1993. And it was a classic cuvee. And in 1997, it was entered into a blind tasting award alongside the wines of Champagne, and it won Best International Sparkling Wine. And that was a real holy shit moment for the industry. And not just for the UK industry, for the worldwide wine industry, because they realized that English sparkling wine could be excellent. And that was a sort of you then see what's quite interesting is if you look at graphs or tables of quantity of vines per acre planted from 1990 to today, the trend starts to just climb after that 1997 event where Ridgeview won that. And then you had Nightingale producing sparkling wine, and then Balfour Winery produces sparkling wine in 2002. And then it just started to grow. And then the real hallmark moment was that transaction when Champagne Taittinger bought that apple orchard that we talked about. That was in 2015. And then the sort of quantity of vines planted per acre really jumps up. And then we get to a point where we're actually producing so much wine of such good quality that there's sort of no doubt whatsoever that English wine is exceptional. And there are many people that argue that actually England is the best place in the world to make sparkling wine because it's coming too warm in Champagne, and people are harvesting earlier and earlier and earlier, and those sort of like complex fruit flavors and that sort of rounded bodiness that comes with the wine, you get that in the last couple of weeks or maybe months of the growing season. But if you're harvesting earlier, you miss that. And so people are getting excited about English wine, and as a consequence, we now have a problem where we're producing too much wine relative to how much we sell. And so the reason why that's relevant is because we were talking about, I'm always trying to win the best contracts to work for the most interesting clients and being the best jobs and stuff. What's happening now is that we're seeing wine businesses, they've nailed production, but they haven't got sales ramping up at the same rate as their production. And so the way in which they think they should they should sort of strive forward just to amalgamate and consolidate with other wine businesses. So we're getting into this sort of M&A style industry, which is exactly what the MBA was all about. Um, and I sort of thank my stars I did that, really, because there's no other vineyard agent in the country that has an MBA apart from me. And so I'm in this position where I can stay in the middle of it all. Um, Although I have to say, it's quite nerve wracking because most of the people that do come into the industry are sort of three or four sort of significant transactions in that sort of M&A space ahead of me. And so you're sort of trying to keep up and catch up. And going toe to toe with sort of CFOs from Deutsche Bank and from Credit Suisse who are like, "Let's see your valuation there," and you're like, "Oh fuck, here it is."
How about this bottle of sparkling white first, or
Yeah,
two, and then have a look
and then
at
we
it?
can have a look at it. Yeah. So, but it's epic, really, because they're faking it when it comes to understanding English wine. I'm faking it when it comes to understanding.
We've got the exact same thing happening in the natural capital sector. So
Yeah,
loads of finances come into the sector, and they're all desperately trying to demonstrate their credibility in an environmental way.
yeah,
Whereas OC, that's where we come from.
yeah,
Like my journey. Well, you've heard some of my stuff. My journey started throwing myself off waterfalls into rivers. Like that's
yep,
how we learnt to love the environment.
yep.
Um, aren't they solving the wrong problem? I'm not trying to do you out of mergers and acquisitions. They're great. But don't they have a branding and sales strategy problem rather than if they've nailed production, you just need to sell more? So surely you've maybe already done it, but surely it's a shout out to Stephen Bartlett and go, you've got every other brand under the sun. Why haven't you got a wine brand? You've got a reach to several 100 million people. All of a sudden, you probably have. That's where that smile is. Are you speaking to Bartlett already?
Well, no, I've just
Flight Story
if
Wine.
if he is listening, then do go into your LinkedIn messages because there's a message from me saying, "Would you like to buy an English wine business?"
Of course, because that's the reach, right?
Of course, it
It's
is.
just
Absolutely.
amplification.
Yeah, it is. It's piggybacking off people that have got a route to market. I mean, look at AU Vodka. They were Charlie Sloth, for the guy from Fire in the Booth. He invested in AU Vodka, and then whenever any of the rap artists were given an award for their work, he'd say, "Oh, would you mind giving the model of AU Vodka alongside that trophy, please?" And they go, "Of course." And then all
Jennifer Aniston had Smart Water and finding
exactly,
those people to push that forward.
yeah. But those people are outliers, and if you can't back an outlier, then you have to promote it and you have to market it in the same way that everyone else is doing. I mean, there are some quite cool. So recently, there's a negotiation business called Folk. And negotiation is where you don't own a vineyard, you don't own a winery. You basically say to a wine producer, "Could you please sell your grapes to this wine producer? And Mr. Wine Producer, could you please make the wine to this standard in this bottle? I'll have nothing to do with any of it. I'll just sell it." And this guy called Tom Cannon, who come from a venture capital background, he started Folk with his wife, and they recently did this quite cheeky advert about they were sailing quite close to the wind with the Bollinger name. It was like, "We love a Bolly, but we don't like champers," or it was something like about English wine was better than champagne, and they referenced Bolly, and so Bollinger then wrote them a cease and desist letter.
Oh, what a gift.
I know. So it arrived at Tom's dad's house, and so Tom's dad's open it, sort of eating his marmalade on toast, and goes, "Tom, you've been given this cease and desist letter by Bollinger." And they then produced this discount code called Goliath 20, so you can get 20% off their wine if you use the discount code. And it went viral, and he was on GB News being interviewed by Nigel Farage. Not necessarily that I condone his politics, but the point is that it made it onto national news. It was all over the global news in the wine trade, and their sales went up by like 2,400%. And you know, when things like that happen, your sales obviously just go bam. But day to day, people are selling into a market where there's a 34 million bottle surplus of wine that's being produced versus wine that's being sold, and so there is a there is a real credible reason for M&A style transactions because you can create efficiencies between the two businesses. You can, often there are businesses that are very, very, very strong in one particular sales channel. So there are some businesses that just target premium on trade, like super premium restaurants and hotels, versus those that just target supermarkets. And if you bring those two businesses together, then you've got a really broad spread of different sales channels that the two businesses combined can approach.
Is there Are there high quality non-alcoholic wines?
Yeah, yeah, there are.
Because we've
Yeah.
seen that peak. I was thinking about the spirit side of things. The non-alcoholic spirits is ramping up a lot. And when I think about the next generation of buyers and consumers, I think the alcohol element is going to drop.
Mm.
Talk to us about that part of the industry.
So there's a wine called Wild Idol, which is made by it's owned by Nick Candy, of Candy and Candy, the developers. And Nick Candy wanted to have a premium. He wanted to have a premium non-alcoholic sparkling wine, and it's made for him by a guy called Fergus Elias, who's the winemaker of Balfour Winery, which is Richard Balfour Lynn. I spoke about Richard earlier. So Fergus goes out to Frankfurt 6 times a year and basically does the blending of Wild Idle. There's no duty because there's no alcohol, but it sells for £30 a bottle. And so there's VAT on that. So you back out the VAT. So that's about £6 out. And so you're making £24, but then there's obviously about £6 to make it. So yeah, it's about £18 of margin, cash margin per bottle. And bear in mind, most wine bottles have a cash margin of, you know, between £7 and £12. So it's a super premium wine selling with no duty with like massive cash margin.
And what someone should do on the next version of those is give a Bartlett 15% of the ownership for reach above a level.
Yeah,
If our sales are at X, if you hit a sale of Y, there's a ratchet onto your percentage ownership
yeah,
and it would fly.
yeah. You can message me directly, Stephen. It's fine.
And I will take my 20% commission on the side of that as a matchmaker. I don't drink, but again, the artistry, the branding. We were out in New York Climate Week, and I stopped and did like a 5-minute pitch on the branding of this donut shop that we walked past. So every other donut shop was just like neon pink, like color everywhere, Technicolor. And there's this one donut shop that had a security guard on the outside. Ben, do you remember with the lab coat? And it was like it looked like the most elegant French, like beauty house type thing. And like even that there was a billboard outside with like immaculately placed, positioned minimalist donuts. They're like 5 times the price of all the others, but it was just such a completely different. Like it could have been a high-end watch boutique,
Wow.
but and it was like that's branding. That's how you give a premium feel and product to everything else.
So that have you ever read of any of Alex Hormozy's work?
I've seen some of his podcast stuff. I haven't read his books.
So he talks about a baker who was getting up at sort of 3 in the morning, making sort of 400 loaves of bread, and then was working all day to sell them all. And then their friend said, "Why don't you double the price and just make half as many?" And he was like, "But then what would happen to all the other customers?" And he goes, "Well, it doesn't matter. You sell half as many for twice the price, you'd make the same amount of revenue." And then he goes, "Well, now you do it again. So reduce it from 200 down to 100 and double the price again." And he ends up getting up at 6 a.m. rather than 3 a.m. and finishing at 2 p.m. and going off and spending time with his kids. And he's making the same revenue because he's like baked in exclusivity and premium value into this sort of core of customers that love what he produces.
Love it. What's next for wine in the UK?
Um,
Actually, I keep saying the UK, and you very specifically say English.
well,
Yeah.
so all my clients are based in England, but there's some very good vineyards in Wales.
I
Although
was going to ask you about, have you looked at the OC portfolio with respect to wine?
no,
We should look at it.
yeah,
I think there's a couple of things that might be interesting, especially the Welsh site. So one of our board members, David Williamson, who was due to be here today actually to meet you, but he couldn't make it. He has a small vineyard of his own, and he's a passionate wine producer. When he came to Wales with us, he was like, I do wonder. So we should have a look at those and
yeah,
see if it
okay,
does line up.
sounds interesting.
Yeah. So English wine, what's next?
So that consolidation is just beginning, and I'm in the middle of a project at the moment, which will hopefully be the sort of Taittinger deal in the consolidation space, and that will probably create more similar transactions within that emerging market. We're also seeing, with the increase in national insurance and with the increase in interest rates, we're seeing some businesses who have overreached themselves fairly considerably, who are being bought up in distress, and that's a new space as well. It's not a particularly nice space to be in, but it I think it's really important that wherever anybody is in the journey of their business, they deserve the best service. And so we are thinking about how we help people through that receivership journey as well as, because the thing is that if you own a wine business, you want in however you sell your business, you want to look like you're selling it at your discretion. There are some businesses, so there are some property agencies who specialize just in selling distressed assets. And if your wine business sells through one of those, the whole market knows that you've fallen on your face.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that Knight Frank are there to support the owners of wine businesses in that particular moment, because they can look like they're selling it at their discretion, even though behind closed doors, the gloves are down.
Quickest way to drop a price is for people to know you have to sell.
Yeah, exactly. And so we're working quite a lot with building relationships with administrators at the moment, so that they know that we can sell chattels as well as properties. Because when you sell a wine business, it goes with the wine, it goes with the tanks, it goes with the vineyard machinery. Whereas they see Knight Frank and they think, big smart houses. How would they know how to value wine in store? Well, the answer is that's a massive part of my role. And so it's about education of administrators that we can help at every stage of that process.
Love it. Is AI touching your world at the moment?
Um, so I use it, if I'm producing reports and I have to write an executive summary, I'll say, can you produce this for me? Um, what's quite nice about my role, I remember when ChatGPT first became like mainstream, I I typed into the search bar, can you please find me a village in the UK with a growing season temperature of more than 14.5 degrees Celsius and precipitation of less than 400 millimeters a year, please? That's beneath 200 meters above sea level. And they said, sorry, we can't do that. And I was like, brilliant. You'll never take my job then.
When was the last time you tested that?
About 15 months ago.
Okay. I reckon it probably could now.
Well, yeah, maybe I'll do it after this. But luckily, I'm in a space that's relatively. I think where a relationship needs to be in the middle between two people, that's so important in the role that I do that I don't think AI would ever take that place.
I completely agree, but it'll do everything around it to help you do even more of that.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think if we brought you back in 18 months, you'd be telling me you're as excited about AI as you were about your MBA.
Yeah, well, yes.
So it's changed the way I do everything. So
So how do you like day to day? How would you use it?
okay, so I we write a weekly update at the end of the week to our board,
Mhm.
somewhere between 5 and 9 bullet points spanning sort of an operational update on the business. So it's more of a flavor so they feel in touch with it and engaged with it and the stories that are going on. So we have a grid across the team where we would plan that out 2 or 3 weeks in advance with us each of the heads of to say, what have you got coming up that's interesting? There you go. And then we write it and produce it. We've given every document we've ever had previously to AI and said, do the entire grid for 2026 for us by topic, by day, by week. And it output it and has given us a plan of delivery of all of that straight up within seconds. Another example. So my first book was published earlier this year. I wrote a book 2 and had already on to book 3. So I write a lot. Book 2 was me being really angry about pretty much getting yelled at by local people and difficulties in various estates. It's a bit too much of that. Book 3 was more about the evolution of the business and the sort of things we've talked about today. So it was like, okay, so we built an AI agent. So it's got everything I've ever written, ever produced, all the strategies about the business. And we said, give me 5 different compositions of what a better book would look like. So it gave us those. We pick and chose, brilliant, and said, right, we'd like the book to look like this. So I built another little agent that said, please sort, format, readjust that entire book into this order and structure that you've given me. 90 seconds.
Wow.
That would have taken me days and days to do that.
Yeah.
So like the question now becomes not how would AI help, it's how can it, like how do you pose the question that parts of it could be assisted with? So summaries is a great part of it, but so many different iterations that are, like everything we've got for it. We use it for the podcast questions. So we've built every podcast we've ever had, every transcript from there's in there. So we put your name in now and it will give us a 20 question outline and a briefing about you. So I'll do it at a dinner or something. I'll meet someone. They don't even need a big online following. So I met this lady at a dinner a few weeks ago. She had like 1,000 LinkedIn connections. She gave me a name, I put it in, and it literally gave, and she was like, how does it know that? What about this? What about this? And it was like 15 questions, and it was the questions not to ask. And she's like, oh no, I wouldn't like that one. And it's really cool when you can show people that.
Wow.
So do you know who Dan Martell is? Have you come across him? He's very much in the Alex Hormozy model. So he's got a YouTube channel, and he's gone from he was actually in like juvenile detention as a kid and self-made multi-100 million pound exits on software businesses. He's got a big YouTube channel and AI is his new thing. And he talks about different ways he uses the tools in different parts of his business. But it has been massively transformative for everything we do from the podcast production side of it, for like imagery and things. So yeah, future. So Penny tells me you're the first person who's referenced the hats question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So husband, father, landowner, businessman? Which of the hats fits best?
Um, so there's like the answer of how they fit best today, and there's the answer of how I want them to fit best. And so I all this stuff that I do in Knight Frank, that is my job. But I also have a responsibility to run the estate that my family have owned for 220 years, which is the Stradey estate in South Wales. And so my day, if you look at my diary, it will be first thing, you know, meeting with solicitor and barrister to discuss litigation that's taking place on the Stradey estate. Then it would be drive up to one of the farmhouses because there's a conversion to an Airbnb. Then it would be drive back down to the estate office to have a Teams call with my colleagues in Knight Frank. Then it would be sit down to do the next iteration of evaluation for a client because we're doing an M&A deal with them. Then it would be pick the kids up. It would be take them to swimming, come back, feed them, bath time, bedtime, and then collapse on the sofa. And that is a completely normal day for me. And um, where I use my mind the whole time in work. Um, and when you get home, there is a real discipline of getting out of your head and into the sort of stillness of your body so that you can be a good dad and a good husband. And I have found that really, really difficult. And sometimes I'll be like checking my emails because I'm waiting for a reply from like a serious issue, either on the estate or in work. And it means I'm not present at home. And so at the moment, I would say I'm 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 best in work, and then I don't know where it falls with husband and dad. Maybe dad first and husband second, but I really want it to change. And sometimes when I'm you know we have 5 vacant properties at home at the moment, and so I've got no cash for any of them. I'm paying insurance on all of them. I'm paying council tax on all of them, and I'm pushing to get them relet. And my wife is a very, very talented interior designer and architect, and she is amazing at doing all of those conversions. And that process takes iteration, it takes thought, it takes assembling samples. And sometimes if I've got a time commitment, I'll be impatient in rushing that process. And sometimes she'll be like, I just wish you'd let me be feminine. That was one of the things that she said. And I thought that's a really weird, but also really like impactful and powerful thing you've just said. And it happened a couple of times. And then a friend of mine who uses a coach, he said to me, the coach I'm working with, it's called Bodhi, he's doing a thing called Understanding the Feminine. Would you like to do it? It's a 12-week Zoom course. And I said, yes, I really, really want to do that because Nia and I have been, in work, I've been sort of bringing work home with me, and she's saying that she wants to feel more feminine, and she's finding it difficult with me being so like frantic in my own mind. And it's run by this guy called Bodhi Aldridge, who is this like he lives in Byron Bay. He's like this sort of 70-year-old surfer. Whenever he comes on the Teams call, he's always like, I mean, you get like seawater in your sinuses and you have to like get out of your nose. You can see him like taking a break to like jettison this sort of Byron Bay seawater out of his nose. And his work is about helping men get out of their heads into their body through meditation, through embodied presence. Because he says, your mind is a brilliant servant, it's a terrible master. And I find myself sometimes rushing around in my head, and then Nia's trying to connect with me with the way that she wants to be felt, and I'm trying to understand what she's wants. I'm trying to sort of understand her feelings with my mind, and we're missing each other. And so through this work with Bodhi and this daily meditation practice, and I do it 7 minutes 40 every morning. There's a meditation that he does where you align your mind, your heart, and your dantian, which is in traditional culture, everyone knew you had, some people, in Hindu culture, it's called the hara. In Chinese culture, it's called the dantian. It's like your gut feel. And you align all those three, and you can quieten your mind and you can bring yourself into this sense of embodied presence. And when you do it, you pick up on the emotions that people have in a way that I had never done before. Um, And my wife has really noticed a difference. And when I heard your question to one of your other guests on what's the hat you wear best, work, dad, or husband, I knew the answer, and I fucking hated the answer. I was like, I've got this the wrong way around. And um, I've just realized, like, in work, I spend so much of my time being the best version of my work self, but the most important relationship I have is with my wife. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm putting so much effort into being the best sort of Mr. Vineyard UK. What am I doing? And so I signed up to the course. It was more money than I've ever spent with any consultant before. I'm not a big one for therapy or that sort of stuff, but I just thought he's saying something that I feel is really important. And so I'd love to be able to message you in like a year's time and say, Rich, it's husband, dad, work. That's what I'd love to be able to do. Um, but I'm not there yet.
Do you think your wife will listen back to this?
I think what are we, 40 minutes in? I think she probably would have heard everything up until now before and go, oh, for God's sake.
We'll clip this bit and send her this bit. I can't imagine that she would hear how you just spoke and not be incredibly moved and proud of your aspirations to do that. That's pretty incredible. Mine's work, husband, dad. Definitely. I I don't want to quieten it yet. So I've never had a day away from the business
Mm,
ever. And because we're thinking about next chapters and we're thinking about what happens if there's always every year a conversation, what happens if Rich gets hit by a bus, who takes over immediately? What does this look like? I love those conversations about what happens when you die. More of them than I'd like. And so we said, well, when we go away on a family holiday, do we have a practice run of Rich isn't in the business for a week? What happens? Went home, my wife went, please don't do it when we're on holiday.
mm,
I'd like to have a nice holiday.
yeah.
You're not going to be fun if you can't talk to people in the business. So it's interesting if Helen's listening to this, which she rarely does, bless her. She gets plenty of me as it is. I don't think she'd want me to yet. I always remember, do you ever watch The West Wing, the TV show? It's beautifully written, US political drama. Shout out to Adam, one of our board members who loves it and can do it almost word for word. One of the lead characters and him and his wife are having a debate, and she's like, this job isn't more important than your marriage. And he said, it is for the next 5 years, because he was the chief of staff in Number 10. Actually, we literally had that conversation we had Lord Ben Gascoigne on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, who was Boris Johnson's chief of staff in Number 10. And he literally had that conversation with his wife. He's like, as we go do this for the next X years, this is the most important thing. And she went, yes, I agree. It is for that period. Yeah. Interesting. What's the if there is a husband or a wife out there who's listening to it and there is a friction, there is not an alignment at home, what's the flag they should look out for to go, maybe I need to get some advice, get a coach, think about things in different ways?
I think it's so I can speak from a man's perspective only, right? I think so many of us, so many men are they're they're not they're not comfortable understanding the world through how they feel. They're trained at school to you're rewarded for accomplishments. It's like, well done you. You've done this piece of work well. And then if you're I went to a boarding school when I was 10. And you're you're trying to get through that homesickness bit as quickly as you can. And if there are people in the dorm with you who are homesick, you're slightly thinking, oh, all of us want to go to sleep here, mate. You know, are you going to get through the homesickness bit and then we can all get a good night's sleep? And you're becoming emotionally self-sufficient probably quicker than you ought to be, really. And what happens is you end up being very emotionally self-sufficient, and you become very, very good at seeing the world through how you through your mind, and you slightly close off the way you feel. And so fast forward to I'm now 38. If you feel like you're trying to understand how your wife feels rather than feeling how she feels, then you're in two different lanes. And it's it's a really easy thing to do when you know how, but being taught how to do it is really hard to it's really hard to find someone that can teach you how to do it. And so yeah, the guy I've been working with is called Bodie Aldridge, and he he's got this great way of explaining the different masculine and feminine vibes that we all have within us. Not men, not male and female, but masculine and feminine, because we all have a masculine and feminine part of each of us. And the way he describes it is that everything that flows is feminine, everything that contains the flow is masculine. So the river is the feminine, the masculine is the riverbed, the roaring ocean is the feminine, the harbor wall is the masculine. And if you're constantly in your masculine, then you're not connected with your feminine, then you're not going to be able to understand, and you're not going to be able to connect with your beloved in front of you. And it's creating this channel between your mind and your heart through embodied presence, through daily meditation, that allows you to understand and connect with. It's allowed me to connect with my wife in a much stronger way. And if you've so it's a long answer to your question, which was, if there are people out there that feel they need to go on that path, how would they know? The short answer is, if you're trying to think through how they feel, you're missing a trick. You've got to get into your body, and then you can feel the way that they feel. Yeah, I think that's about right.
It's a great answer. People often assume I would have a masculine leadership style because of how I look, and I don't in the slightest.
I don't. So listening to your previous podcast where you were interviewed on extronomics or
Oh, that's like one of the first ones I ever did with Lee. Yeah,
yeah, and
Lee
I
Cooper.
remember you said that your wife has you on. She can follow your phone, and you'd say, I'm leaving home," and then you'd get asked by people, "Oh, can I have a quick word?" And you'd always give it your time for them. That's a very feminine characteristic, to be compassionate and to give time and hold space for people. So I sort of knew that about you before I came in, but I'm interested that you're saying it.
Well, I think because I'm big and tattooed, and whoever does a hit piece on me always like to comment on my physique, which is hilarious, which our marketing team love because they're like, it's a point of differentiation at least. Um, like I don't yell. I get loud if I'm excited, but as a team, as a culture, and I think often businesses and teams, they ultimately default to the leadership style of culture.
Mm,
All our team hug each other when they see each other. And yes, we've got high demands and high standards, but it's compassion first. So if something bad happens, it's like, are you okay? What can I do to help? Here you go. Um, so I totally get that. It's really interesting listening to you describe um, your journey of going from thought to feel. So our respective childhoods couldn't have been any different in terms of what it sounds like. And I feel the feeling before I get the thought. So if I walk into a room, I don't know if I've talked about this in the podcast very much, but if I walk into a room full of people and there's like 5 or 6 of them with their back to me, I have a pretty good shot at giving you an idea of where they were feeling wise. Because if I didn't get that right as a kid, I got hit. So I'd walk into a room and I had to tell pretty quick if someone was pissed off or not, because otherwise it was consequential. Now, that's not great in the moment, but in business, it's an incredibly useful tool because
mm,
I can feel a sentiment of things. If someone's nervous about something, or if I get a fraction of a sentence, I've usually got a pretty good guess of what's coming next. And, in business, when you get someone who's struggling at home, or if you've got someone who's coming in to resign, I always know,
mm,
like a little bit ahead of time. Um, so I think it is, and our head of marketing, Elle, she has the same from very different childhood and stuff. She had a lovely childhood, but she can feel emotions as well,
mm,
and it's a different route. So I think actually I've had to learn to think after the emotion rather than the other way around.
mm.
How do you sleep?
Oh, well, so given the age my kids are at, I
Yeah,
so I woke up in a different bed to the one I went to bed in last night, which happens most nights, because at 2 a.m. one of my daughters will say, "Daddy, can you can you come into bed with me?"
yeah,
And so you're like, "Yeah, of course." Um, but on Saturday night, which is in 2 nights, it's tomorrow night, my wife and I are going to a 40th birthday party. We're gonna have a hotel room. I'm gonna sleep for 8 hours all the way through.
So do you fall asleep straight away?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I slept really well.
And has your journey of recognizing the emotional side of things affected that in any way?
No, I've always been pretty lucky with my sleep. Um, yeah, I've never struggled too much with my sleep.
Yeah, I can't sleep in silence. I sleep with an earphone in and listening to 1980s vintage satire American wrestling podcasts. So
Right. But
because
your wife loves that.
oh she doesn't know, like it's one ear. So
Yeah.
I sleep on my side, so it's in this earphone. And if my mind isn't preoccupied, I'll just overthink everything. Um, but and also before I had challenging jobs, I couldn't sleep at all because my brain would be like, "So we're ready. What are we talking about now? Let's think about
Mm.
things." What I have been able to do lately, which is kind of cool, that I didn't realize everyone couldn't do, I can now tell the back of my mind to deal with something and let me know when it's finished processing it.
Yeah.
So can you do the same thing?
Well, sometimes I'll have a problem. I'm like, "It's all right. My subconscious will deal with it in a
Yes.
couple of hours."
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like almost move that. So I
Yeah.
mentally now like move it to the back and go, you deal with that.
Yep.
And then you can get on with a load of other stuff and it'll go, I'm done. Here's
Yes.
where that's really good is like moral and ethical challenges which don't have an obvious answer,
Mm.
where you're making a compromise or how it affects multiple different domains. I love leaving that to the back and letting it process.
Mm. So interesting, going back to that embodied presence and the meditation, it is a way of connecting your thinking mind with your heart, with your intuition, because your intuition lives in your gut. And the answers that you come up with once you've had 7 or 8 minutes of meditation, uh, they're answers that you feel much more comfortable with in all three places. And so, if ever I've got really, really big decisions to make, I will take myself away for 7 or 8 minutes and just do a quick meditation, and then come back and say, "Okay, this is what I think."
Your story about dealing with the homesickness at boarding school. So I never had that experience. That must have been pretty harrowing.
Well, so for context, I loved boarding school. It was basically the opportunity to live with 20 of my great friends, get up to mischief, um, and play sport with them, and do crafts and afternoon games, and come up with sort of harebrained schemes with them for like 9 months of the year. Of course, when you first join, it's such a change that you do have a wobble.
Was there a conversation or were you told you're going?
No, I had the opportunity. My parents were very inclusive in the way that we talked about me going to school, and they gave me the option of loads of different schools to go to. Um, and we chose a school in Bath called Monkton Combe. And I come from a sort of a family with strong Christian values. Monkton Combe was a Christian school. My cousins went there. I met the headmaster. He was called Mr. Lloyd Williams. He was a lovely guy. I really, really loved it. But of course, you are away from your parents, and I had two younger brothers, and we're friends as well as brothers. And so, of course, like when you first arrive, you are a bit like, "Ooh, I'm not sure about this." And then when I went on to a senior school in Shrewsbury, which is near Birmingham, um, that was it's a new environment again where you're the youngest, and all the older boys shave, and they're all like much much taller than I was, and I just remember thinking, this is a step up again. And so there are stages where you sort of you feel homesick, but of course you're not really in the environment where you can sort of turn to the kids in the class and say, "I'm feeling a bit homesick." You'd go to matron and you go to your housemaster, but it was quite a sort of dutiful conversation. It wasn't like a sort of, "Oh, come and wrap your arms around you."
Stiff upper lip type.
A little
It'll,
bit, yeah.
it'll,
And so you do become very emotionally self-sufficient, and you don't realize it at the time, but that's what's happening.
yeah.
Um, and so one of the things we did with Bodhi was I did a retreat with him last month, and he did a visualization where he said, so there's about 8 of us, and they were all guys who were my age and above, all all have a mortgage, all have businesses, all are dads, all are husbands, all dealing with the same pressures in life. Um, And he said, I want you to all close your eyes. Imagine you're walking through a woodland and you come to an opening in the woodland and you see there's like a tree stump you sit on. And then through the trees, you see this young boy walk towards you, and you realize it's you as a young boy. And you can see what clothes he's wearing, you can see what color his hair is, and he walks up towards you, and then you hold his hand, and you just take a moment to thank him for all the things that he's brought to your lives. It's the same person. And you identify a particular moment in your childhood where you started to create a behavior that was based upon a belief, and that belief came from that particular incident. And you thank them for the way that that belief and that behavior has served you up until this moment. And then you acknowledge, going forwards, we don't need this belief anymore. And then you give them a big hug, they turn into dust. And then you go forwards, and that belief has been left there. And it didn't impact me particularly when we did that. But then I just been thinking about it for ages and ages afterwards. And it came back to this, oh yeah, when I was in school, I did become really emotionally self-sufficient. And it was because, I wasn't really in an environment where I could talk about my feelings that much, because it was a sort of fairly masculine environment, all boys school. I was the youngest kid and all the kids were older than me, and everyone was like, stiff upper lip. And so that was the belief, that was the wound, that was the belief, that was the behavior. And he talks about the hero's journey, which is getting back to the essence, which is the essence is inside the behavior, inside the belief, inside the wounds. In the middle is the essence. And the hero's journey is getting back to the essence. So ridding yourself of the belief, ridding yourself of that sort of outer crust of the behaviors. Um, and then when you do all that and you have this embodiment of your presence, you suddenly have this sense of openness and this ability to resonate with the way that other people are feeling. And with my wife, it's been great because I don't have to think about how I'm feeling. I can pick up on how she's feeling, and if I'm doing it right, we can connect better. But it's so new for her. She's a bit like, wait a second, what is this? Who is this? And she's going through this stage where she's like, is this going to be forever, or is this just for a couple of weeks, or and it's exciting because it's like, well, no, this is the new paradigm, because so often the those beliefs and those behaviors and those masks, they come from a feeling of not good enough. And then the moment you're in that feeling of not good enough, you're into the persecutor, rescuer, victim, that drama triangle. Um, and there is this lovely moment where you kind of go, actually, if you can shed yourself of the mask, the behavior, the belief, the wound, back to the essence, you're not really governed by that not good enough anymore. You have this complete freedom to choose whether the emotion that bubbles up overtakes you, or if you go, oh, I've just spotted, I feel a bit anxious, but I'm going to choose not to worry about that too much. And then you're not subjected to this old paradigm of victim, persecutor, rescuer. You can choose to just kind of observe what's going on and kind of be a bit more relaxed in the situation. And you kind of go, bloody hell, Bodhi was right. Uh, so that's a long answer to a question of which hat do I think I wear best, dad in work, or husband. But I feel like I'm on a journey to reorientating it so that it's all about family, and then work is something that I do, and I'm good at it, but it's not as important as my family. But I'm not there yet, but that's where I'm heading.
The hat you wear better than any other is student. I don't think I've found anyone who has taken as much from every chapter. The way you full name people that have had such an impact on your life is beautiful. Like, it's almost you're recognizing them, putting them on a pedestal. You're like, there they are. I'm placing them. I'm giving them the respect and the credence they deserve. And what I love is this is your next chapter of learning. You have recognized the skill set your wife and children need from you to be amazing at that. You've had to go find that next mentor.
Mm,
So, and you're getting them just at the right time, because my kids are a little bit older than yours. That's when they're going to need that emotional side of it, because they're not going to have the words to express what they feel yet. You're going to have to feel it with them.
yeah.
Um, one of the most impressive students I've come across, Ed. What a
Oh, thank you.
brilliant conversation.
I'll take that.
I will end as I always do. What is the one question I haven't asked you wish I had?
Ah, what is my favorite game to play with my kids?
Great question.
Yeah. So we have a trampoline at home, and we play a game called the Kissing Dinosaur, where I will sit in the middle of the trampoline on the bed, and they run around me, and I'll rugby tackle them to the ground, and then like give them kisses on their neck and their cheeks, and then they're like in fits of laughter, and they stand back up again, and they keep running round and round and round, and it's just bliss. And my wife will just sit on the deck chair with her eyes closed, listening to this whole thing going on. It's just like three children shrilling with laughter. And I'd be sat in the middle going, I'm a kissing dinosaur as they run as they run around me. Um, that is the best game that we have at home.
Congratulations, we have the title of your podcast and the greatest shot ever to come out the shoot room, The Kissing Dinosaur. Ed, an absolute pleasure having you come in. Thank you, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's been great.